with the usual, call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting 14 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. Pursuant to the order of reference of Tuesday, May 26, 2020, Standing Order 1082, and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, February 25, 2020, the committee is resuming its study of the state of Pacific salmon. Today's meeting is taking place, of course, by video conference. The proceedings are public and are made available via the House of Commons website. So you are aware the webcast will show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. Regular members know this by now, but as a reminder and for the benefit of our witnesses who participate in the House of Commons virtual committee meeting for the first time, I should remind you of a few rules to follow. Firstly, interpretation in this video conference will work very much like in a regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. As you are speaking, if you plan to alternate from one language to the other, you will need to also switch the interpretations channel so it aligns with the language you are speaking. You may want to allow for a short pause when switching languages. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. Should members have a point of order, they should activate their mic and state that they have a point of order. If a member wishes to intervene on a point of order that has been raised by another member, I encourage him or her to use the raised hand function. In order to do so, you should click on the participants at the bottom of your screen. When the list pops up, you will see next to your name that you can click raise hand. This will signal to me as chair your interest to speak and will keep the names in a chronological order. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. The use of headsets is strongly encouraged. And finally, when speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. Should any technical challenge arise, for example, in relation to interpretation or a problem with your audio arises, please advise the chair immediately and the technical team will work to resolve them. Please note that we may need to suspend during these times as we need to ensure all members are able to participate fully. Before we get started, can everyone click on their screen in the top right-hand corner and ensure they are on gallery view? With this view, you should be able to see all the participants in a grid view. It will ensure that all video participants can see one another. Today, of course, I would now like to welcome our witnesses. With us, we have Alexandra Morton, independent biologist, Pacific Coast Wild Salmon Society. We have Mr. Ken Pierce from the Pacific Balance Pinniped Society. We have Dustin Snyder, Director, Stock Building Programs with the Spruce City Wildlife Association. Of course, we have somebody appearing as well as a witness who's we're used to seeing sat at the other side of the table, and someone who I'm sure we all have the utmost respect for, Mr. Finn Donnelly, Chair of the Rivershed Society of British Columbia. And as well, of course, join us again today from the Green Party, we have Miss May, Member of Parliament for Saanich Gulf Islands. Great to see you as well, Miss May, who, again, I'm sure you have all of our highest respect. We'll get started now. Miss Morton, you have 6 minutes or less, please. You're on mute. We can't hear you. You're on mute. You have to take your iPad up. There you go.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we do.
Can you?
Yep.
Oh, okay, great. I'm speaking to you from Numgeese territory. You're on the Fraser-Sockeye migration route. And I want to start by saying that I'm grateful for the Government of Canada's response to COVID-19. There is no other country I would rather be in right now. For the moment, policy is keeping pace with emerging science on an emerging virus. However, this is not the case when it comes to salmon runs of national importance. If fishing was the dominant extinction driver for salmon runs, the fact that most salmon fisheries have been increasingly closed over the last few years would have caused the salmon runs to increase. As well, in one of the most heavily farmed regions of the coast, the Broughton Archipelago, wild salmon are declining in the unlogged and the logged watersheds. For some reason, the Canadian government is ignoring critical warnings that salmon farms are harming wild salmon runs. This is coming from the Auditor General's Office, Dr. Mona Niemer, the Chief Scientist of Canada, Stephen Harper's Cohen Commission, which recommended that salmon farms be prohibited from the Discovery Islands unless Minister Bernadette Jordan can demonstrate by September 30th of this year that the risk from the farms is minimal. However, this is just not going to be possible for her. Last fall, then Minister Jonathan Wilkinson announced that the 2019 sockeye return was the lowest in the history of this country. And yet, on March 1st of this year, DFO granted salmon farms permission to have an unlimited number of sea lice. Predictably, 99% of the young Fraser sockeye on the migration route were infected with sea lice levels that we know will reduce their survival. Wild salmon are simply not making it to sea past the salmon farms. On July 30th, the sockeye trying to go by Port Hardy were infected with an average of 42 lice per fish. These fish are 10 centimeters long, 42 lice. If this continues, there's nothing you can do that will boost their survival. You have to deal with the salmon farming issue. The sockeye infected with sea lice this year are the dominant cycle. This is the one the Fraser River nations and commercial fisheries depend on, and we will know the outcome of this infection in 2022. Then there's the situation with the virus PRV, Piscine orthoreovirus. One DFO lab says this virus is natural to British Columbia and it's low risk, don't worry about it. But another DFO lab is saying it's significant risk to Pacific salmon. Academic research is saying this is not natural to the BC coast, it's from the Atlantic. My research is saying this virus is spreading. And in 2018, Washington State prohibited PRV-infected farm salmon because it was too big a risk to wild salmon. And as a result, the farms in Washington State are standing empty because there are no clean fish for that company to access, to put into those pens. But here in BC, the industry told the Federal Court of Canada that they would be significantly impacted if they were not allowed to farm with PRV-infected salmon. And so DFO policy has decided that the virus is natural and low risk. If you don't see scandal here, it's because you're not looking. Salmon farms are the greatest single impact on wild salmon since the glaciers. And this impact is entirely removable. The one place on this coast where sea lice are going down is the Broughton Archipelago, where First Nations have removed several million farmed Atlantic salmon. So here's my recommendations to you. Create a Pacific region director of wild salmon. We need somebody at a senior management level in DFO whose whole life is focusing on restoring wild salmon. And this must be done in partnership with First Nations. Mandate the removal of salmon farms from the ocean, beginning with the biggest migration routes. This will attract significant land-based investment because the infrastructure for this industry is already here. And please harness the remarkable science that is in DFO that can read the immune system of fish, allowing the fish to actually talk to us, to tell us where and how we are hurting them, and whether we are making that better or worse. And so the fish themselves will guide their own restoration. If Canada follows this path, truly meaningful reconciliation begins. We jump right into the fight against climate change by significantly increasing the annual growth in forests. And every fishing country in the world will come to Canada to learn how we did this. So thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
Thank you for that. We'll now go to Mr. Pearce for 6 minutes or less. You take yourself off mute.
Ça va là? Maintenant, je ne peux pas vous entendre.
Should I continue on?
Yes, you can continue. Mr. Chair is not going to speak by the time you speak.
Okay, good.
Go ahead.
Good. Number one, thank you very much for having me on. I consider this to be an honor to represent over 300,000 British Columbians that are very, very concerned with the rapid decline in our salmon stocks. My focus is based on the decline in Chinook, coho, and steelhead. All the studies that I've been using will be based on the Gulf of Georgia and the Salish Sea. So did a copy of my notes reach your floor, or should I just read them off? I'll just read, it won't take long. My background, I commercial fished 1962 to 67, longline halibut and Saint salmon on one of the top boats of the coast at the time. My venture paid my way through UBC. I'm an avid sports fisherman, having fished most rivers in BC for both salmon and steelhead. Very active in both fresh and saltwater sports fishing. My grandsons are fourth generation involved in sports fishing. My son sailed on the Queen's Reach, one of the top boats on the coast, for 9 years, and is now working for DFO Nanaimo under Will Flutke. For 40 years, our family has had a hunting shack on Canoe Pass at the mouth of the Fraser River, very tuned in to what is happening to the lower Fraser. So let's go on to the focus of Pacific Balanced Pinniped Society. Pinnipeds on the British Columbia coast and their impact on outbound juvenile Chinook, coho, and steelhead smolts and inbound adults. Our mission is restoring the balance of pinnipeds and help bring back our salmon. Our supporting science, number one, Brandon Casco et al. Of NOAA. Of course, our Pacific Salmon Foundation and their Salish Sea Survival Project. Dr. Carl Walters, UBC, who is a very strong supporter of our group. Ben Nelson of UBC. I've also quoting articles published in the Columbia Basin Bulletin. Data from Peter Oleziak, retired DFO, who did all the counts on the pinnipeds. And our IFMP, which is too long to over here, which was presented to DFO some 2.5 years ago to deal with this problem. And we're making very little progress inside DFO. I want to say special thanks to Mel Arnold for getting involved in this. He's been a great help in helping us move along. So I'll just, for those who aren't dialed in, I'm just going to quickly go over some stats here on the pinnipeds. And these come from Peter Oleziak's publications. Seal population at the start of protection under the Marine Mammals Protection Act in 1972, and this is all related to the Gulf of Georgia, is 7,000. Current population is 48,000. Stellar sea lion, 72, approx 10,000. Coastwide now 48,000. California seals, estimate only, as no detailed studies available, are 20,000. Smolt consumption by pinnipeds is our main focus. Consumption, as stated by Pacific Salmon Foundation Salish Sea Survival Project, is 30 to 45% of smolts, lower for Chinook, higher for coho. Casco of NOAA and King Salmon Forever studies show up to 80% consumption of Chinook smolts. These studies show a consumption rate of approximately 27 million smolts per year, Chinook smolts per year, and 10 million coho smolts per year. No data is available on steelhead outbound smolt, although extremely depleted in the last 15 years, as witnessed the Thompson and the Chilcotin runs almost annihilated. If this consumption was cut by 50% and using historical long-term survival rates to adults of 3 to 5%, which is currently 1% with the huge pinniped populations, what might this mean for helping restore our Chinook populations and coho populations? For sake of example, I used an average of the above studies and used a consumption rate of 60%. The math shows the following. 27 million Chinook smolts times 60% equals 16,200,000 more survivors times the 3% survival to adult is 486,000 more Chinook adults, which is just for the Gulf of Georgia system only. Applying the same math to the 10 million outbound coho smolts per year is a return of 300,000 more adults. Adult consumption of Chinook. The only current studies I could find were published by Washington State Fish and Wildlife. The results, 3 to 5 returning adults eaten per day on the Columbia River. With up to 5,000 sea lions in the Columbia, this adds up to 15 to 25,000 adults per day. I can't find any studies on in-river consumption on Fraser River for either seals or sea lions, but my guesstimate on adult consumption by seals in the Fraser might go as follows. 5,000 in-river seals times 2 Chinook per week equals 10,000 per week. The same logic would apply to both coho and steelhead adults in river. I'm just quickly going to bring to light some additional studies supporting
thank you, Mr. Pierce. Your time has gone well over the 6-minute mark. If your speaking notes were provided to the chair, I'm sure we'll all have access to them. Anything that didn't come out, hopefully, will come out in the line of questioning in a few minutes. So I thank you for that. We'll now go to Mr. Snyder for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today I'll be speaking about the state of salmon in BC using my experience with the upper and middle Fraser spring and summer Chinook. Unfortunately, I'm here to tell you today that this is not a new problem. The residents of the upper Fraser have been watching salmon populations fade into memory for close to 2 decades. Salmon populations that triggered the Cohen Commission, COSEWIC assessments, and the wild salmon policy have seen continued decline. The department has all but vacated our area, leaving us with old science, a lack of data, a lack of staff, a lack of resources, and this has resulted in a lack of salmon that many in the department are oblivious to. Oddly, the Big Bar landslide has actually become a bittersweet situation. While the slide has put another nail in the coffin of Upper Fraser stocks, the upside is that there's now a conversation happening. Paired with the closure of Chinook fishing in many coastal communities, the rest of the province and the department at large is now noticing what the locals here have been saying for years. Salmon are disappearing. The department, First Nations, the province, and community need to work together to move forward on this. No one organization will be able to do it alone. This is a complex issue. There's no silver bullet. Salmon are disappearing due to a death by 1,000 cuts situation. Long-term commitments will need to be made with a recovery plan and conservation targets in place, or else we will see populations disappear. I'll also note that some populations in the Upper Fraser have already disappeared. Unfortunately, in some cases, these populations were only known to exist by certain people, and they were in very small numbers. Now they're gone. If they were genetically unique or special in some way, we will never know. I'd like to touch on what is referred to as the 3 H's: harvest, habitat, and hatcheries. While we know that harvest has been reduced in an effort to help these stocks, many reports state that these endangered and threatened stocks in the Upper Fraser show a trend that would continue to decline even in the absence of harvest. Coded wire tag data here is 20 plus years old and is known to be incomplete and not meet the requirements of an indicator stock, yet is still currently used to make decisions. Genetic information on the Upper Fraser is also lacking, needs to be refreshed. And lastly, on this point, Upper Fraser residents have not seen an opportunity to take part in fisheries for well over a decade. And our local First Nations folks see little to no harvest many years. Despite that, there is recreational harvest in the marine environment and First Nations harvest taking place on the Lower Fraser on these very stocks. Habitat is a tricky one. While the province runs the land base, the feds manage the fish. Habitat will need collaboration. In the Upper Fraser, there's actually many areas where little to no habitat work is needed. However, these areas are vulnerable to riparian degradation. And after an area's timber is harvested or a forest fire goes through, there's no provincial strategy to grow a healthy, resilient forest that could not only provide a strong economic future, but help us meet these conservation targets as well. This conversation needs to happen with everybody at the table. Even agriculture can have a large impact on the health of riparian areas. And lastly, hatcheries. The kind of hatcheries needed for stock rebuilding are not your run-of-the-mill pump out a ton of fish hatcheries. I'm talking about conservation hatcheries that are using strategic enhancement models, including releases at multiple life stages. A knee-jerk reaction to pump out as many fish as possible, like the proposed and canceled Willow River facility, is no longer the answer. Building a massive hatchery in Upper Fraser is no longer going to make financial or practical sense. Stocks are so low that I believe we would need multiple small facilities. With DFO investment and advice, community and First Nations partners would be able to move these facilities forward and leverage additional funding to increase these programs. A quick example as to why a large facility would no longer work, I can provide some recent numbers. When the Willow River facility was canceled, the Holmes River would see returns of over 4,000 Chinook. It has only surpassed 2,000 Chinook twice since 2003, with returns as low as 200. That was previous to Big Bar. Last year, due to Big Bar, this river seen less than 30 fish return. The Chilako once held over 1,000 Chinook and in recent years has struggled to hit double digits with a record return of 12 last year. And lastly, the Endako River, which Spruce City Wildlife and Carrie-Sakani Tribal Council are partnering on to rebuild, had a habitat assessment that states it could sustain over 1,000 returning spawners, yet has averaged 30 in the last 5 years. Major facilities cannot operate on these small numbers. It's too late for that action. Of course, Big Bar has decimated again these already vulnerable stocks. Climate change is altering the flows of our rivers, the water quality, the water quantity, and the water temperature. Fires have removed large areas of forest needed to stop sediment and soak up rainwater and snowmelt. Better and more consistent monitoring of these situations are going to be needed, or else we will see another Big Bar situation in the future, where again it will go unnoticed and again the stocks will suffer. Current monitoring of stocks consists of counting the fish in some streams and charting the decline. This is a great model to manage to extinction. I will note that it's not too late to rebuild, to update the science, and to make these changes to help these fish thrive, but we need to work with the fish and together, not against them and not against each other. Every year wasted will make this issue more difficult and very much more expensive. And I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to present today as well.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. We'll now go to Mr. Donnelly for 6 minutes or less.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bonjour tout le monde. Thank you for the opportunity to present to the Standing Committee regarding the state of Pacific salmon. My name is Finn Donnelly. E.M. Yuyos is my Squamish name. I'm the chair of the board of a nonprofit charity called the Rivershed Society of British Columbia, which I founded in 1996 after my first swim down the 1,375 kilometer length of the Fraser River, one of the greatest salmon rivers in the world. The Fraser is a Canadian and BC heritage river, one of North America's most diverse watersheds, covering 10 of BC's 14 biogeoclimatic zones, and is home to 1/4 of British Columbians. It fuels 2/3 of BC's economy and is known as the heart and soul of British Columbia. We have a vision of the Fraser watershed being the most resilient watershed on the planet, with salmon, people, and economies flourishing in rivershed communities. Our mission is to conserve, protect, and restore the Fraser's 34 riversheds. We call it Watershed CPR, conserve, protect, and restore. We can't have healthy salmon and salmon runs if we don't have healthy watersheds. Currently, the Fraser is threatened by cumulative impacts, a changing climate, overconsumption of resources, habitat destruction from urban development and resource extraction, loss of biodiversity, excess pollution, lack of regulation, monitoring, and enforcement, reduced funding for watershed CPR, and impacts from open net salmon farm. Lack of government action on watershed CPR has left Fraser River salmon on life support. We believe the federal government must take bold action and invest in watershed CPR now. They must work with the BC government, Indigenous governments, scientists and academics, conservation organizations like ours, fishermen and labor groups, coastal communities, and others to conserve, protect, and restore salmon habitat. I would like to recognize and thank the Minister for taking action on the devastating landslide at Big Bar and making it a priority. I'd also like to thank the federal government for providing the necessary resources to address the emergency at Big Bar. However, key issues remain if the downward trend of wild Pacific salmon returns is to be reversed. The federal government must commit to bold action now before it's too late. The dire situation facing West Coast wild salmon is nothing new. I remember back in 2009 when less than 600,000 sockeye returned after government predicted between 2 and 4 million. Here we are more than a decade later. You just heard from officials. They admitted Fraser, Chinook, and Steelhead are, quote, of grave concern, and they are not expecting 2020 to be, quote, a big year for fisheries. And last year, while everyone was focused on Big Bar, we had the worst return of Fraser sockeye in recorded history. It's clear past federal governments have failed wild Pacific salmon. At least 5 major commissions have been struck over the past 30 years looking at the demise or impacts to West Coast wild salmon, with the latest being the $35 million Cohen Commission, which produced 75 recommendations, with many of the tough recommendations still not fully or properly implemented. Some witnesses have asserted the department is broken. While I won't weigh in on that, I will say the department is a reflection of political will and leadership. Members of this committee are well aware of the problems facing West Coast wild salmon, and I'd bet you could all agree on most of the needed solutions. The question is, do you have the political courage to make the tough recommendations needed in your report? And as respective members of parliament and members of different parties, can you come together to ensure the government implements them? Members, you've heard enough testimony from witnesses to clearly recommend what action the government needs to take to address the problems facing West Coast wild salmon. Witnesses have pointed out the political arm of the government needs to give the bureaucratic arm a fighting chance with bold leadership, resources, and support. One witness clearly stated the government needs to take action, and he clearly identified a NOME framework, as you've just heard: harvest, habitat, and hatcheries. Support science-based conservation-oriented harvest levels. Act on illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Investigate what is taking place in international waters with regard to our Canadian wild Pacific salmon. Make a bold investment in habitat and restoration and protection. BC SHRIF and the Coastal Restoration Fund and other programs are a good start, but inadequate to solve the problem. And address issues associated with industrial hatcheries and open net salmon farms. Immediately transition to safe and efficient land-based closed containment. The RSBC supports those recommendations, and we recommend government make a bold investment in watershed CPR, conserve, protect, and restore. To protect salmon for their entire life cycle, governments need to invest in the cause as opposed to the symptoms and restore watersheds, protect flows, and create habitat in perpetuity. Whichever framework used, the government needs to act now. Please take action to ensure West Coast wild salmon do not go the way of East Coast cod, and invest in making our watersheds the most resilient on the planet, with salmon, people, and economies flourishing in rivershed communities. Merci tout le monde.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. A little bit over, but I couldn't cut off somebody that I have so much respect for. I knew you wouldn't be long more. We'll now go to our round of questioning. I will remind guests and members alike, please leave your system on mute if you're not speaking. It causes a lot of problems if you don't do that. For questioning now, we'll go to Mr. Arnold for 6 minutes or less, please. You're on mute, Mel. You're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a double mute system. I've now got around it. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Your expert testimony is valued to this committee. First, I want to start with Ms. Morton. Ms. Morton, you mentioned the Cohen Commission and the Broughton Archipelago. In the Cohen Commission's 75 recommendations, including recommendation 18 and 19, it clearly stated that the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans should prohibit net pen salmon farming in the Discovery Islands by September 30th, 2020. That's this year, next month. Unless the minister is, and I quote, satisfied that such farms pose at most minimal risk of serious harm to the health of migrating Fraser River sockeye. Now, in your opening this morning, you said that it's not possible for the minister to make that decision. Could you expand on why the minister is not going to be able to make that decision?
Oh, thank you very much for the question. Because of the high sea lice infection rate this year, which is such a visible impact, DFO was not out on the water due to COVID this year, but my research team was. And I preserved all the fish that I counted sea lice on. So if there's any question about what I recorded, the fish are in the freezer and people can look at them. We know from published science in DFO by Dr. Sean Godwin that the lice levels that were on these fish with an average of 9 lice per juvenile sockeye. We know these levels reduce survival. And that's a major risk for a run of fish that are headed for extinction.
Now, is it the sea lice issue that is the only reason that's holding the minister back from making a decision, or are there other factors when you stated that the minister is not going to be able to make that decision?
There's other factors, but as I noted with the PRV science, honestly, it has become so confusing within DFO. I mean, there's 2 DFO labs with completely opposite assessments. So I think, just put that aside for a moment and look at the sea lice, which the minister cannot look at what happened to the Fraser sockeye this year and say that the salmon farms are at most having a minimal risk, because we know that what happened to them is going to reduce their survival. And we know that it happened to 99% of them. That is just not acceptable, I don't think, to Canadians.
So do you believe the proof of more than minimal risk is there?
Yes, I believe it is.
Okay, thank you. The legislation, or the government has promised legislation on an aquaculture act multiple times. So far, we haven't seen any draft legislation or heard much about that. Would be interesting to hear from you what you think an aquaculture act should contain. What would it do to improve conservation of wild species and habitats and provide better regulatory certainty and consistency for aquaculture operators?
Well, I think first and foremost, an aquaculture act has to say move the industry onto land. Then they're free to grow. They don't have sea lice problems. They don't have low oxygen problems. They don't have the algae bloom problems. Norway is pushing very hard for the industry to go onto land. In fact, they adjudicate on every land-based or closed containment application made by the industry because they're trying to save the industry from itself. And so an aquaculture act in Canada should just move it onto land, and let's build a sustainable, remarkable industry that we can be proud of. The industry's had 20 years to deal with the sea lice problem, and there's no evidence that they can deal with it. They brought in $80 million worth of boats last year, and they said they had it handled. But 37% of the farms this spring were over the 3 lice per farm salmon limit that was set 15 years ago by government to protect wild salmon. So they just can't control these sea lice in this country or any country. So the Aquaculture Act should protect the industry and put it on land in closed containment. And honestly, if the 3 Norwegians that are farming here right now don't want to do that, let's look to Canadians. I mean, maybe there's Canadians that want to get into this industry. There's no Canadian-owned fish farms on the coast of British Columbia. And, maybe they want to do it.
Thank you. I think I've got about a minute left. Mr. Snyder, with Spruce City Wildlife Association, has the Wildlife Association been a benefit of the Salmon Enhancement Program in the past, and how important, if so, how important was that program to the organization and the recovery or sustainability of salmon stocks?
Thank you. Yes, so the Spruce City Wildlife Association has a partnership with SEP pretty much right from the inception of SEP. There was a funding cutback at one time, which was the same one that shut down the Penny Hatchery as well as the Quesnel River Research Center hatchery that was in this area. And that currently leaves only Spruce City left. Right now, we are a recipient of the BC Salmon Restoration and Innovation Fund. However, besides that, we don't receive any funding from SEP. We have a community advisor here, and he's extremely dedicated to helping us because we are the only hatchery in his region. Unfortunately, when we need advice, whether it's hatchery advice or upgrade advice or that sort of thing, we have to reach out of region or out of area every time, just because we don't have that advice here. We don't have those resources here. And where it's left us with local stocks, quite frankly, it's left us high and dry, along with not only no programs running, only a fraction of the streams up here are being monitored. And kind of one of those things that when people have something to lose, you can really, it's really easy to get people involved and engaged. Since we've kind of rebooted everything in the hatchery about 4 or 5 years ago here with Spruce City, it's been really interesting and really neat to tell people that there is salmon here, that salmon do swim right by the city. Previous to that, again, we've lost so much and we've lost so many stocks that that those numbers just aren't there for people to see them or realize them, that there is still something to lose.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Thank you, Mr. Snyder. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 6 minutes or less.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for all the witnesses to be here. Ms. Morton, you've been shown the door at more than a few aquaculture facilities when you've attempted to find out what's going on. Is that still happening, or are you being invited in?
I'm not invited by the industry, but I am increasingly invited by First Nations to help them navigate this situation. I spend a lot of time doing ATIPs, so I read the emails between government and industry, and this has given me a background on what is going on and how to help the nations.
Now, you say that the First Nations are inviting you in. Are they the ones with, a financial interest in these operations?
No, in the Broughton Archipelago, the First Nations never engaged in a financial arrangement, and they now have the authority to remove the farms, and they are doing that. And so we're going to get a chance to see what happens when you remove these farms, first place anywhere in the world. But I'm hearing from many nations. They may have signed agreements years ago, but I don't think there's any nations that signed an agreement that said, you are going to lose your wild salmon and we'll take care of you. You'll have farm salmon, but you're going to lose your wild salmon. Nations, and probably most of everybody, thought we could have both the farm salmon and the wild salmon. But that isn't happening here. And it's not happening in Norway, Scotland, Ireland, Faroe Islands, Chile. Well, Chile doesn't have wild salmon, but Eastern Canada. The industry isn't, coexisting with wild salmon anywhere in the world. So there's no place we can look at as an example how to go forward here.
When we look at the issues that you've raised over time, sea lice being one, the PRV, and by the way, the DFO tells us that the PRV that's present in the wild salmon is a different DNA than the ones in Atlantic salmon, but we'll challenge them on that one when their turn comes around. But what other kind of dislocation do the fish farms create along the coast? And I'm thinking impact on other species.
They are the biggest herring fishery on this coast with no quota, no license. During the 2017-2018 First Nation occupation of the salmon farms in the Broughton Archipelago, GoPro cameras were put down in every farm, also in Campbell River, and also on the West Coast. And there's huge herring populations in the farms and around the farms that are apparently feeding on the fines of the pellets that are broadcast out of the mechanical arms. There's also impact on the algae, because this industry is an agricultural industry that's putting out massive quantities of nitrogen and phosphorus. And when I study the movement of the viruses from the farms into the wild environment, the stain from these farms is enormous. There's all kinds of zooplankton that are feeding on the waste of the farms. The young salmon are feeding on the waste of the farms. The birds are picking up. You can get PRV out of the droppings of seagulls. This is a feedlot, and we know feedlots need to be put into closed environments. We don't allow wild birds to land in chicken farms because of the fear of the spread of avian flu. Well, it's the same with the farms. They magnify disease, and they just have to get into close containment.
Mr. Pierce, at one point in our deliberations in the last Parliament, we had an opportunity to chat with some people, and I believe it was from Norway. We asked them about the pinniped issue there, and they said, well, it had been kind of solved. We asked them, well, what happened? And the fellow kind of smiled and just said, well, they just went away. Do you know what happened?
I'm going to relate a story passed on to me by Carl Walters at a recent
very briefly, please, sir. Very briefly, please.
Very involving the deadliest catch people, which you probably watched. And there's been a noted decline in the Steller feline population in the Alaska Panhandle. And they blamed it on various things. And Carl asked the skipper, he said, what's the bottom line? He said, the bottom line is we've got $6,000 plus the crabs coming up in every pot, and we shoot every sea lion that attacks us. This is not happening in our coastal either than incidental people where people are angry and taking out the odd one.
I can't miss the opportunity to ask a recovering member of Parliament who, of course, sat across the table from us in the last Parliament, and we had several interesting discussions about pinnipeds, free from the, if you like, the party affiliation. Mr. Donnelly, what do you really think about the pinniped issue on the West Coast?
Thank you, Mr. Hardy, for the question, and it is definitely good to be back on the other side of the committee. Putting on one of these things has been an interesting move in the last little while, but I do appreciate the seriousness of this the topic, and I do want to also acknowledge Ms. Morton's comments about how the federal government has handled the coronavirus in this country. And I hope that we have the same attention put to the focus of wild salmon, Pacific salmon. In terms of the pinniped issue, I'm not a biologist. I think you should turn to the best science available and let that dictate which way we go. But I would hope that we would focus on issues that are human caused and that we know are human caused. I put in my presentation a framework. I talked about two frameworks, watershed CPR. So we should, I think, focus on conserving, protecting, and restoring the lands, the watersheds that these salmon frequent and are home. And the other framework is harvest habitat and hatcheries. In terms of if the government decides to get into shooting animals, I believe they will get the attention of the international animal welfare community, and that will be a very difficult political issue to address, as we found on the East Coast with this issue. And that's an unfortunate situation when we start shooting other animals to protect certain values in our community. So I would like to see the government focus on the opposite way, which is looking at the source of the problem and habitat, the issues that the animals face to increase productivity and increase the opportunity for salmon to flourish on the West Coast.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy and Mr. Donnelly. We'll now go to, I believe, Madam Gill, you're giving the first 3 minutes to Ms. May. So if that's the case, I'll let Ms. May go, and I'll leave it up to her to switch it over to Madame Gill.
Thank you so much. And I'd speak in French, and I had to put myself on the English channel, and I know that messes everyone up, but I want to thank my colleague from the Bloc Québécois for this opportunity. I want to start with you, Mr. Schneider, because of the focus that you've brought to habitat, and specifically, I think a lot of Canadians would be shocked to know that the fires that have burned through BC have not resulted in replanting efforts at all. I'm particularly concerned about that. I know the steep banks along tributaries into the Thompson and Fraser. You see the Bonaparte with every time it rains, you get debris from the forest fires from a few years ago, and it really, I don't know how salmon could live through all that. I just wanted to ask if you see any hope of a significant effort from any level of government to replant those slopes with trees that are appropriate to that ecosystem to help restore salmon?
I guess the short answer is no. The province is most times focused on planting a monocultured forest that is merchantable timber. And these steep slopes, exactly like you said, when you have hectare upon hectare upon hectare with no trees that would normally be soaking up all that moisture has to go somewhere, and it goes into the ground, and then it eventually ends up in the water. The Nicola River in recent years is a brand new river. Spawning grounds that used to be there are now moved over by hundreds of meters, just because of the amount of sediment and so on and so forth that has gone into the river, just because of the lack of forest surrounding. But yes, the habitat for what we need habitat that's appropriate for that area, and diversified. Sorry, the word's escaping me, but we need multiple species of trees. We can't just have checkerboard pine and spruce.
Yeah. Thank you. I want to turn to our colleague, Finn Donnelly. In terms of, I love your words around a resilient watershed ecosystems where we focus on the habitat. And I think the question around forests suggests the same things. I don't think I'll get more than one more question in before we go back to Madame Gill. But could you, we had another witness speak about the Lower Fraser and the number of flood management dikes and put in over many, many years. If we were to focus on watershed management in the way you described for resiliency, what role would addressing those man-made structures have in restoring a healthy ecosystem for salmon, in your view?
Thank you, Ms. May, for the question. I think that's, if I could just comment as well and then roll into the Lower Fraser, following on Mr. Snyder's comments, I think that replanting is critically important. Replanting watersheds is a fundamental, and that's where we need that habitat restoration program and a significant investment. COVID-19 actually offers an opportunity to employ and get people back working, doing just that with a significant investment. As well, there are co-benefits to planting forests, not just for salmon. So there are multiple benefits and for humans. So turning to the Lower Fraser and flood management is one of those benefits. So if we look at addressing those dikes with salmon safe passage, fish pumps that could come out, again, this is another potential COVID response where you can get people working to do these, working with municipalities, with First Nations. There are multiple benefits when you address these issues. So this is, I think, a fantastic way for the federal government to work with the provincial government, Indigenous governments, and all of those partners that I mentioned in my presentation to get people working to reinvest in watersheds and to bring our salmon back.
Thank you. Alexandra Morton, I have a Sockeye 2010 print above my desk, and I didn't ask you any questions, but thank you for your work. I really need to turn it back over to my colleague from the Bloc Québécois.
Monsieur le Président, est-ce que je pourrais savoir combien de temps?
Mr. Chairman, might I know how much time is left for me? Can you hear me?
C'est excellent.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to salute and thank all of our witnesses, as well as my former colleague, Mr. Donnelly. My question is more specifically for Mr. Snyder. You mentioned several times the lack of data, up-to-date data that would be required. So I would like to hear you. We're talking about hypotheses. Might you talk to us about the differences we might see if we compare data from 20 years ago and current data? How would this change perhaps some recommendations?
Thank you for the question. So the data difference that we'd be looking at is not only population based, given that our populations were a lot higher back then, but salmon are really unique in their straying capabilities now. So when salmon are headed up now, it's true that they'll return to their natal stream. However, if they're running on a limited tank of fuel, I guess, if you want to put it that way, and if they start to run out of fuel, they will stray off somewhere. And what they're doing then is they're kind of distributing those genetics elsewhere. Now, with what they're doing at Big Bar right now, they are collecting some broodstock at Big Bar for the potential need for emergency enhancement. However, what they're finding is that as they test the genetics of some of these fish, it's not necessarily that certain. So we're ending up with, say, they're 40% certain that the fish is from a certain stream, or they're 18% certain. And when you get your percentages that low, can you even call it certain at all? Not only that, but with regards to a coded wire tag program and an indicator stock, that helps assess what is coming back or where it's being caught. Now, when you have a super small population, those fish might travel together. They might not venture out as far. They don't need to seek as much habitat. Now, when there's a whole bunch of fish, so if we were to have 100,000 fish returning to the area, those fish would be straying out to other areas. And when they migrate into the ocean, they would be covering different areas. And for example, the catch in the marine environment right now might not actually be showing that they're catching any upper Fraser stocks. However, those stocks might actually be there. They're just in such small numbers. Example being that you can't catch any fish if they're extinct. That doesn't mean that you didn't impact them at one time. I hope that answers your question there.
Oui, merci.
Yes, thank you. I really don't have time for another question, but in fact, very quickly, in order for us to use this data, how long would it take to update the data for you to have access to current data?
The fish, the Chinook up here, run on a 5-year cycle. So it would be 5 years before you could get the data on one cycle of fish. So again, this is something that needs long-term investment and long-term monitoring.
Okay, thank you, Madame Gill. We'll now go to our colleague, Mr. Johns, for 6 minutes or less.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank all of the witnesses for the important work that you're doing to protect and conserve and save our wild salmon. I'll start with my former colleague and good friend, Finn Donnelly. Thank you for the work that you're doing post being an MP at Rivershed Society of British Columbia. Mr. Donnelly, you've heard loud and clear about the need for restoration. You talked about CPR, conserve, protect, and restore. We just heard in the last round of the BC Salmon Restoration Fund that there was $340 million in applications and only $70 million approved. So clearly it's oversubscribed. The need is great. We heard from First Nations at this committee that they were rejected, and they said if they weren't funded, that really in groups along the Fraser and throughout coastal British Columbia soon, that our wild salmon were going to be in a dire situation and extinction was imminent. Can you talk about how important it is for the government to step up its game federally, and what kind of investment is needed now, especially with the opportunity with COVID and COVID recovery plan, since a lot of this work is physical distancing that could be done now, and the timing of it?
Thank you, Mr. Johns, for the question, and thank you for your good work representing the West Coast of Canada. The issue is paramount. We need to act now. The federal government needs to take action. As I mentioned in my presentation, that there must be bold action now. The issue is if we don't act, if the federal government does not act now, we are on the brink of losing our West Coast wild salmon and our way of life. So the kinds of investments we need to magnify or need to reflect that. So if we were talking dollars, one of the things we were talking about is an immediate investment of $500 million for just the Fraser watershed alone over the next 10 years, so $50 million a year. Even that is a modest investment. You mentioned the BC Salmon Restoration Innovation Fund. That is a good start, $142 million over 5 years, but it is not sufficient. You just mentioned the need in all the different communities, First Nation and other communities that want to restore their watersheds, and they have not been able to do that. The funds needed need to be increased. So an opportunity presents itself currently with COVID to get people back working. We have had economic devastation around globally in Canada and on the West Coast. This offers an opportunity to partner with the provincial government and focus on watershed CPR, focus on watershed security, secure our watersheds, and make an investment and a move with bold leadership to signal to Canadians that this is a serious issue and that we are taking this issue seriously. I have to say it's similar to Big Bar. We need that kind of an investment to move forward. So just to give an example, in the Lower Fraser alone, Dr. Tara Martins of UBC is working on work that will show that we need to invest at least $350 million to prevent many species from being extinct over the next number of years. That's just the Lower Fraser. The estuary. If we include the Fraser Valley, which is another significant part of salmon habitat of the Lower Fraser, you could easily get to $500 million over the next 5 to 10 years just in the Lower Fraser, not to mention the areas that Mr. Snyder has talked about in the Upper Fraser and many of the regions there, not to mention ocean conditions that Dr. Morton has talked about and referred to. So we have an opportunity right now to work with partners and invest in watershed CPR and address these critical threats. But Mr. Johns, if I can conclude by saying that if you could encourage the members of this committee to take bold action in your recommendations, in your report to government, and to really work together for the sake of wild Pacific salmon to encourage the government to do the right thing. We have studied this to death over the last 30 years. It is time to take action before we lose our West Coast wild salmon and way of life.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Ms. Morton, we heard the minister's mandate in the campaign. She said that they were going to create a plan to transition from open net pen salmon farming by 2025. It wasn't a plan to create a plan by 2025 to transition from open net pen salmon farming. Can you comment about the broken promise that the government's making right now?
Yes, people are losing faith in the Canadian federal government on this issue because Trudeau clearly understands there's a problem with salmon farming. He understands people don't want it. And so he made the election promise that this industry would be out of our waters by 2025. Then he assigned an East Coast minister who I don't really think has a grip on the severity of the situation here in British Columbia. And she started saying, no, it's not to get it out of the water, it's to have a plan to get it out of the water. As of yesterday in a radio interview, she seems to have flopped back the other direction. And I just feel like the government's not sure whether it's more scared of the 3 salmon farming companies in British Columbia or the Canadians who, see these wild salmon as a national treasure, food security, many things. So it's not a good situation. And I wonder whether Canada needs two ministers. I mean, this is a big country with two big coasts with very different needs, very different species. And I really think we need a West Coast minister, given the situation here in British Columbia, or at the very least, somebody at the regional management level whose whole life is understanding what is going on with these fish.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Johns. We'll now go to our second round of questioning. Mr. Bragdon, for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, special guests. We're so thankful for the input and the perspectives that you all bring to the table today. I'd like to direct my questions, starting with Mr. Pierce. DFO recently provided the committee with written responses to questions raised by committee members about the pinniped population on the BC coast. The DFO responses stated, I quote, "The current harbor seal population is in line with historic population norms. Stellar sea lion populations in BC waters have increased by approximately fourfold since surveys began in the early 1970s, end quote. Do you agree with these statements?
I strongly disagree with the seal populations. In our IFMP, we've got historical data presented that the current populations are almost double that pre-arrival of white man to the coast. So we're at, by Bolesiak's study, at 105,000 seals, and we were at 50-odd thousand because of normal hunting by the strong First Nations. The sea lion population, I agree with those numbers, and they're a major problem.
Okay, thank you. It is apparent that active management of pinnipeds in our Pacific region could be a valuable tool for conserving and restoring wild salmon stocks. Could you describe what a sustainable pinniped fishery should look like if the purpose of the fishery is to conserve and help restore the wild salmon populations?
In our IFMP, we're targeting a reduction through harvest, which we have markets for the byproducts of the seals, reducing that by 50% over the next 3 years. It's a trial test for the first 10 or 15,000 to scientifically assess whether or not we're on track.
The active management and removal of specific pinnipeds in specific locations on the Pacific coast have delivered measurable results for wild stocks. Endangered winter steelhead in Oregon's upper Willamette River system continue to show improved numbers this season following the removal of 33 pinnipeds from the waters in 2019. We keep hearing from the government that they need to study the pinniped factor more. Do you think that the proven results of active predator management in other jurisdictions could be achieved in our waters if we were to adopt active management and predator populations that have grown unchecked?
First of all, let's address the studies. We've studied this to death. We've spent millions on it. We have the top scientists on both sides of the border specifically pointing out the consumption. I'm actively following what's happening on the Columbia River because I think it's applicable to the Fraser system. And there's a 23-member board that met in August to specifically talk about culling, not harvesting, the sea lions on the Columbia. And that report will be out by the end of September. And I think that should provide a very good roadmap for us moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Mr. Chair, do I have time for another question?
Yes, a quick one, please.
Okay, this is to Mr. Snyder. Basically, as I'm sure you're aware, the federal government attempted to cut funding to the Salmonoid Enhancement Program in 2017. The SEP provides valuable supports for public education, grassroots conservation initiatives in BC for the benefit of our wild Pacific salmon. The question is, has this Spruce City Wildlife Association benefited from the SEP resources in the past, and how important is the salmonoid enhancement program to grassroots organizations like yours in BC?
Thank you for the question, and that program is extremely important. Spruce City Wildlife Association did benefit in the past. However, there was significant cuts to this area, I believe, in the 2012 range, and a lot of those resources were taken away from this from the Upper Fraser. All of our habitat staff are now based out of Kamloops. Again, too, we have one community advisor here, which would be our only SEP staff, from pretty much from Kamloops until the top of the Fraser watershed. So if you look at that on a map, it's a pretty significant chunk of the province, and we've got one SEP staff member. In that Williams Lake to Valemont, Vanderhoof area, he runs the Stream to Sea program. So he puts on a lot of miles, that one gentleman. But having said that, yes, years and years ago, Spruce City Wildlife Association did receive funds. We did receive support from those folks, and we were involved in habitat projects. However, the resource restoration unit team based out of Kamloops, they're just swamped. They've got a really big chunk of area. So even if we really wanted their help or needed their help with habitat projects, there'd be a long line to stand in to get their help.
Thank you, Mr. Bragdon. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. When we were discussing the big bar situation and efforts to assist or recover stocks, there was actually an adverse reaction to the notion that hatcheries could fill the gap. There were issues with DNA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, Mr. Donnelly, we'll start with you, and then I'll ask Mr. Snyder to chime in. What does a good, doable hatchery strategy look like for the Fraser River?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Hardy. First of all, I'm not a biologist, so I want to preface that. But my comments on hatcheries are from what I've gained from reading research from the department and other sources. And definitely you've raised the issue of diversity and weakening the diverse biodiversity and the stock, the ability for those salmon to fend off disease and other impacts, make them competitive in the environment. I think from what I understand and what I've read, the industrial hatchery model used in the United States mainly has not proven successful, and it has proven extremely expensive when you measure investment per fish. So what Mr. Snyder and others have, I think, mentioned, obviously he can talk more to this, is looking at specific hatcheries, community-based hatcheries, because many of these hatcheries in British Columbia, which we've chosen a very different model, are education centers, they're community support centers, they're places for SAP, or Salmon Enhancement Program, to operate, to work with communities and classrooms. They're excellent areas in which you can build infrastructure in communities, not just for salmon, but for people as well in communities. So I think the government should consider that type of facility and consider the impact and the effects that would have. But again, that is to try to get salmon off life support or steelhead. And that's what I think we need to do. And then concentrate on bold investments in habitat and some of the root causes in our watersheds, the homes that these salmon live in, including the ocean. So those are the areas that I think the government should be focused on. I reiterate with conserve, protect, and restore. We need to focus on protecting salmon habitat, restoring it where it's been impacted, and then we need a conservation ethic throughout British Columbia, the West Coast, indeed throughout Canada and the world, to really have the transition that we're talking about, making toward a resilient watershed, a resilient way of life.
Mr. Snyder, I would get from Mr. Donnelly's comments that economies of scale aren't necessarily the metric you want to use when it comes to setting up hatchery operations. That we have to look beyond that and consider a broader range of benefits from operations that might cost more to operate but deliver better results. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would completely. I think what is needed, especially in the Upper Fraser, is conservation focused hatcheries. So this isn't get as many fish in the bin as you can and set them all free at the exact same size at the exact same time. I think what we need is a more natural approach to ensure that we can get that boost in the population, but ensure that we're not impacting diversity, especially given that some of these populations are so small. So in some areas they've tried and they're looking into a multi-stage release. So this would include releasing them actually digging fake reds or salmon nests in the river and planting some eyed eggs so that they can transition naturally without any predators. Releasing some at the unfed fry stage, and then your fry as well as your smolt stage. There's also a variety of things that you can do within the facility to ensure that you are taking a more natural approach. A lot of the things that we raise salmon in they don't look natural. For us, we use big aluminum troughs. So integrating some habitat into that, some different colors, painting the inside of the thing, as well as ensuring that you're not interacting with the fish as much as possible. Now, when you go in and you hand feed, I can speak to this from experience in our last couple of years here. When you hand feed the fish, eventually you go in and these things almost become pets. They get used to you. So when I go in and I would look over a trough and they were expecting food, they'd all rise to the top and get excited because that meant dinner time. However, last year we used auto feeders, and right up until release, I could not get those fish to come to me. That was a little bit sad for me, but I know it was better for the fish. And it's little things like that we need to integrate into these conservation focused hatcheries. Just blasting out as many fish as possible, as Mr. Donnelly said, is not going to give us the result we want, and that's been proven in multiple facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. We'll now go to Mr. Calkins for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. Alexander, great to see you back at committee. Just one quick question for you, based on the comments that you made in the switch to freshwater or a non-saltwater or closed containment. Would you like to see specifically strictly land-based freshwater closed containment, or would you be satisfied with closed containment in a closed containment pen on the ocean? What specifically do you think, and where do you think this needs to go?
Well, in my experience, the ocean eventually breaks everything. So it would make sense to just get them onto land, build a secure system. It doesn't necessarily have to be freshwater. They can make saltwater. And then they have a much greater ability to collect the waste. So it just makes sense to put them right on land.
And you're not concerned at all then with any water exchanges if they use a freshwater system, that the same type of contagions, because a salmonid is a salmonid, if it likely affects a salmon population, it'll likely affect a trout or a char population. You're not worried about any crossover there, or do you think those risks are much more manageable than open net pens?
Oh, I'm very concerned, and that's why they need to come out of the water. But thank you for that question. So it's these closed recirculating systems that are the future of the industry. And closed mean it's not getting out. The Namgis First Nation has field trialed such a system, and they built perk holes on the watershed, and they put dye in the tanks, and then they operated, and they would see if the dye was spreading. And that was quite a few years ago. So the technology has advanced enormously.
Is that the facility up by Port McNeill? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes, the Kutera project, which is recently,
yeah, I've been there. I've seen that. That's wonderful. Well, thank you for coming back to committee. I'm going to move now to just quickly to Mr. Pierce. Mr. Pierce, what do you think, based on the testimony that we've heard from other witnesses? We've heard a number of what the in order to have effective ecosystem-based management, where we manage all populations. This is a typical wildlife management population strategy that all governments use at the provincial level for terrestrial animals and so on. Yet the Government of Canada, through its Marine Mammal Protection Act, takes and puts in a box marine mammals and takes them out of the ecosystem-based management approach. if we're able to get back to ecosystem-based management approach of these of all species in the food chain, what number are we looking at? Where do we need to go to restore some semblance of balance? And what are our numbers for seals, and what are our numbers for sea lions per se? What would you recommend?
Our focus is, because of the science behind it, is on the seals in the Gulf of Georgia and the Salish Sea right now, and the current populations by latest Elysiac 218 study shows 105,000 on the coast, 48,000 in the Gulf. And it's our proposal that we harvest up to 50% of this and then monitor the results. And that would just bring it back into historical balance. We're not out to annihilate. We're just out to bring back into balance.
Yeah. What would you say to political entities that scream and yell the restoration of salmon, but also scream and yell, don't touch the seals? What would you say their net effect is having on salmon populations?
I've got two answers to that. First of all, the financial answer, and we've heard a lot of money being spent on habitat and whatnot. And my first question is, are you happy with 50+% of that money being eaten by seals in their first month or two in the ocean? The second, of course, is that the seals and the southern resident orcas are not compatible, because the consumption rate by the seals on the orcas' preferred food of Chinooks, they're just not enough. You can't have both. It's one or the other. What do you want?
Thank you very much, Mr. Pearce. Mr. Snyder, notwithstanding the background that you see behind me, I'm going to ask you whether or not you believe anglers and hunters play a very important and vital role in conservation of fish and wildlife species.
Very much so, actually, yes. The Spruce City Wildlife Association, I kind of am focused on the fish side of things, but we do have wildlife projects going on as well. We're very involved in the caribou situation around here and that sort of thing. Again, I'd like to tie that back to kind of giving people something to lose. I have some friends who live in the Lower Mainland, and when they take a long drive all the way up to Prince George to come see me, they don't notice if they don't see a moose the whole drive. If I drive all the way to Vancouver and I don't see a moose, it's something that stands out to me. So that appreciation for the species.
Fair enough. I think you and I are always looking off the road when we're driving to see what we can see. I'm no different than you. I know there's a lot of. I want to talk about spawning channels, Mr. Chair. Nobody's talked about spawning channels yet.
Well, I can't help that. I don't decide on the questions or the answers. Mr. Hardy, for 5 minutes or less, please.
Let's let Mr. Calkins ask that question, okay? Never let it be said I never did anything for you, Blaine.
No, I appreciate that, Ken. And I actually want to talk both to Mr. Snyder and, of course, our good old friend Finn. It's good to see you, Finn. There's a lot of talk about hatcheries. And Mr. Snyder, you mentioned that there is maybe not an effectiveness for a large-scale hatchery in the area that you're at, but maybe some of the smaller community-based hatcheries. Finn, I think you would agree with that as well. But there's also spawning channels, and I'd like to get both your inputs from your respective groups and organizations and people that you work with. If hatcheries are going to be part of a solution in restoring stocks, where are the opportunities for some more spawning channels as well, so that ones that might have been reared in a hatchery will have a better opportunity at an enhanced natural spawning chance when they return, if they get to return?
I'll quickly start there, and yes, so the spawning channels do work in quite a few areas. However, that's also something that is kind of forced into a situation now. In where we're at, there is a significant bear population and an increasing grizzly population, and these things kind of end up big food troughs. So in that case, I would more so support and kind of a natural spawning habitat area where those fish have a better chance to be able to kind of defend themselves and escape, and use their preferred habitat, as opposed to kind of habitat that we have distinctly forced them into, if that makes sense.
Okay, if I can interject here now, because I have one other question, Blaine, that I'd like to get back to Ms. Morton. We've been speaking a lot about the lower reaches of British Columbia, the Fraser River, Salish Sea, etc. But we've seen, the same kind of declines up at Mesiaden, along the Nass, the Skeena, everything else, where we don't have the same conditions that we've been talking about in the lower part of the province. So what's going on there?
Well, I know in 2013, 5% of the fish in the Skeena and the lower Nass were infected with this Piscine reovirus. But if we want to answer that question, we need a director of wild salmon. We need somebody to pick up the genomic profiling tools. If you were to sample all the fish in British Columbia as they come and go on this coast, their immune systems would light up at intervals. And you could go back to those spots and see, okay, what caused that? And you could try to fix it. And then the next year, you can ask the salmon again, did we make it better or not? And so we could answer the questions in the Nass. This genomic profiling is also phenomenally powerful in hatcheries. This is Dr. Christy Miller's lab at the Pacific Biological Station in Nanaimo. This is an enormous tool to restore wild salmon, which simply is not being picked up.
Well, we'll be looking forward to the opportunity to ask her about that. Is there any place on the coast that would be safe for open net aquaculture?
No, we looked for it. And the problem is the industry is based on share price. And so they have to grow every single year. They will never be satisfied with 5, 10, 1,000 farms. They always have to have more farms. And through torturous talks with the industry years ago, we realized that wild salmon and farm salmon need the same environment. And so somebody put this industry into the biggest wild salmon migration routes of this coast. And not surprisingly, it's not going well. So it just needs to start over and get out into the recycling tanks, closed containment, which more and more business people are investing in around the world.
All right. Thank you for that. The health of the herring stock. We noticed on the East Coast that the herring there are starting to not look very good. They look unhealthy. They're skinny. They're not good food source for the cod. And we've had problems with our runs here. Is it the health, or is it just simply the number of herring that is creating the problem here, Ms. Morton?
Oh, it's both. We have a massive herring die-off going on right now in Queen Charlotte Strait, and I know that DFO is not researching it. I'm trying to take samples. We also have the industry catching so many large numbers of them. But again, if we use the genomic science, we could find out exactly what these problems were. There's really no need to guess anymore.
All right. Thank you for that. That's fine for me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. We'll now go to Madame Gill for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, j'aimerais m'adresser.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask a question of Mr. Pierce. First off, I'd like to thank him. It's always interesting to get witnesses who have hands-on experience in fisheries, and I'm very interested in the question of seals. For example, here in Quebec, we have the Madeline Islands. So we're talking about obstacles here. You're talking about harvesting half the seals. That could be a solution to help out the salmon. But what would be the obstacles that you could meet? It's quite ambitious to try and do that. Would fishers cooperate? There's all a question of the market. And could you give me a little picture, a general picture of what you think about your harvesting plan of 50% of the seals?
Thanks for the question, and very easily answered. We've got two. First of all, the harvesting is a no-brainer. We have all the infrastructure in place with the unemployed fishers and their large vessels. And we've talked to several of the processing plants, including one on Vancouver Island, Hub City Fisheries, who their leader is a board member. There's two markets, and the one that we initially started getting very positive response was the Asian market, specifically the Chinese and the Japanese market, and it's broken down into pelts, into meat, and oil. But that's closed right now to COVID. So we started poking around the commercial sector, and bingo, there's a 5 million pound commercial bait requirement for commercial prawn fishermen and crab fishermen. And we've talked to several of the First Nation peoples that have used this bait, and they said it's fantastic. So it's in my opinion, this is a no-brainer because the infrastructure is already in place to handle this situation. We just need a green light to go out and again bring it back into balance and then assess. I hope that answers your question.
Parfaitement, merci beaucoup.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Pierce.
Mon temps est écoulé, Monsieur le Président.
Looks like my time is up, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chair.
Madam Gill, we'll now go to Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Morton, again, for the important work you're doing for fighting to protect wild salmon on coastal British Columbia waters. We talked about the Cohen Commission and some of the recommendations. Right now, the current model is DFO is there to both regulate and promote the sector. Justice Cohen made it very clear that this is a conflict. And also, now we're hearing from the minister that she's addressing all 75 recommendations made by the Cohen Commission, including, that would mean, number 19, which is about moving the fish farms out of the Broughton Archipelago if there's any impact on wild stocks. And as you articulated, that the science isn't there for this year, but previous year science would be able to justify and articulate that there's a serious impact on wild migrating salmon. Can you speak about the Cohen Commission and whether you believe the government's actually addressing all 75 recommendations and maybe give a grade on how they're doing on those recommendations and the implementation of them?
Thank you. The Canadian public spent $23 million on the Cohen Commission, and I think Justice Bruce Cohen did a fine job of looking at what we know about wild salmon, what needs to be done. And he said, if we want the Fraser River sockeye, the commission was just on the Fraser River sockeye, then salmon farms have to be removed from the Discovery Islands by September of this year if there's greater than minimal impact. DFO has not come to me to ask about the sea lice outbreak this year. They were not out there themselves. Justice Bruce Cohen also said that, you know, the chance that the government has been captured by the fish farm industry is substantial. And when you see regulatory people moving back and forth, working in industry, then working in DFO, and then moving back to industry, they are the same people. DFO has become part of the salmon farming industry. So the salmon stocks have gone lower than 2009, which triggered the Cohen Commission. So if you were to grade the government response to this commission based on salmon returns, you'd have to give them a failing grade. Because in the end, that's the only thing that matters, is whether the fish are coming back or not. And they're simply not. We are headed for the lowest season yet again. And I'm not sure people realize, I mean, for so long they hear that salmon stocks are going down, but extinction is right there at the bottom. And we're very, very close. And my colleagues that are working in the Upper Fraser River, they're seeing that for themselves. So the grade is failing. They've not followed those recommendations and restored the wild salmon runs of this province.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Johns. Your time is up. I'm hopefully going to get through another round. We'll now go to Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes or less, please. And I will be strict on the time to make sure we get through the full round.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll switch to Mr. Snyder, if possible. Mr. Snyder, you mentioned that in your opening remarks that the dated coded wire tag program method is continued to be used by DFO. And I assume that it's being used for DFO's assessment and return monitoring systems. Are you aware of the newer technologies and methods that could replace the coded wire tag system?
Yes, I am. Yeah. And so just to kind of quickly reiterate there, so the coded wire tag information that I was referring to is the stuff that they were looking at with regards to the penny hatchery that was up here, which was DFO's facility that was running the coded wire tag program. That facility never actually met its quota for how many were released to be an official indicator stock. Some years, actually, the place ran out of water and they had to transfer those fish elsewhere and had mass die-offs. Yet that information from that hatchery that was shut down over a decade ago is still being used today to make decisions. So yes, I am aware of some of the parental-based tagging, and that's I think a good way to go.
Yeah. Do you know why it would be that DFO refuses to retire the coated wire tag system and transition towards other newer, better technologies?
In a State of the Salmon presentation that I recently seen from somebody in DFO, there was multiple pictures of a rear view mirror where DFO is telling itself we need to stop doing this and looking in that rear view mirror. Unfortunately, I think that's just all it is, that this is kind of what's always been done. So that's what is continuing to be done.
Okay, thank you. In the last few months here, I've had the opportunity of touring a salmon hatchery on the Okanagan system. That hatchery has enabled the restoration of salmon stocks, sockeye salmon stocks, into the Okanagan water system, which feeds into the Columbia, restoring those stocks for the first time in decades, or over 100 years. Now they're actually able to migrate all the way up into the Okanagan Lake. That hatchery was built on a small stream in Penticton. And when I was there, they showed me what they call a hatchery in a box. It was a self-contained hatchery in a 20-foot sea-can shipping container. You had mentioned that large-scale hatcheries aren't the way to go. Do you see an opportunity or a use for smaller, sometimes portable hatcheries that could be placed on some of these streams where, as you mentioned, some of these streams only see a dozen returns in a year to rebuild those stocks? Would those be a way to go? Because I understand Washington State and the U.S. has been using them, but the DFO has really shown no interest or has been reluctant here in Canada.
Yes, those I am familiar with them, and the ONA is doing some great work there. I would just suggest that there does need to be some alterations to those, especially given that they would be operating on severely endangered stocks. So, for example, our hatchery, we have backup power, we have redundancy in all of our filtering, all of our pumps, as well as we have a bit of a different climate up here. Last year, we seen minus 47 for almost a week straight. Those you have to pump a lot of water through those tin cans in order to not get a freeze up at minus 47. So I would suggest that yes, there is potential, but there would need to be some modifications or some placement situations where maybe those things were placed in Prince George, for example, and the brood stock was still transferred in and out. As opposed to kind of being plunked in a really remote area where if there was a power failure, that it might be extremely difficult to get to when there's 10 feet of snow in February or something like that.
Okay, and would these tie in well with the new identification systems, the DNA testing, so they can match parent fish to the stream they actually come from, and make sure those eggs and fry that are being hatched out go into that genetically specific stream type?
Yes, again, too, we do need to kind of reinvigorate that program up here to ensure that our genetic information is accurate. But yes, there is potential to use those programs on that with the hatchery in a can concept.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Donnelly, would you say that there's dysfunctional competition between the various fishing interests, the commercial, the indigenous, the sports fishing, and do you think that if so, that is also harming the stocks?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mr. Hardy. Yeah, absolutely. There's vested interest in protecting the access to a way of life. So for sure. And there is also going to be varied interests in terms of what is considered the solution. I think what we have to look at, and that's why we've, again, continued to focus on watershed CPR, looking at the cause is not going to just prove the best solutions. We need to look at the root, just the symptoms. We need to look at the root cause. We are talking about hatcheries being part of the solution. I think that, as Mr. Snyder has said, conservation-based, science-related hatcheries can play a role in the solution. But we've known that if we look south of the border in California, Washington, Oregon, This has not proven to be a solution since the 70s. If we look back over the last 30, 40 years, they have not seen the results of implementing that managed solution. We need to do something different in Canada. We have a real opportunity, not just with the Fraser and North Columbia, but also, Skeena, the Nass, the other great watersheds that you mentioned, Mr. Hardy. But we need to prevent the damage that's happening from many industrial developments. We need to work smarter, do things better. We need to protect habitat. We need to restore habitat where damaged. And then we need a conservation ethic. The ecosystem is going to be your best and cheapest solution to solving the problem. So if we can assist in any way, it's focusing on restoring the ecosystem, protecting the ecosystem, and letting that do its job. The issue where we,
if I could, Finn, you alluded to something a little earlier, and I wanted to touch on this before my time runs out, and that is the pressure from foreign fishing out in the deep ocean. I mean, we saw the cod fishery impacted, particularly by Portuguese fishing and Spanish. What about the Pacific? What do we know about what's going on out there that officialdom doesn't seem to be able to deal with?
Great question, Mr. Hardy, and I thank you for asking that. And when I was a member of Parliament and the Fisheries and Oceans critic for the NDP at the time in 2017, I asked the then Minister of Fisheries that question and his Chief of Staff, Ms. Blewett. And the focus or the response was that we know who the flag of the country that have these massive nets out in not far from domestic waters, in international waters off our shores, but weren't able to come forward with identifying that country because of the lack of support at the G7 or G8 table. And that is, that again is part of the BOLD's solution. We need to out those countries that are taking our fish in massive quantities. If there is illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing happening, this is something in our waters we need as a country to identify that. We also know, even in domestic waters, that we can be doing a better job of harvesting with selective methods in the Fraser and many other watersheds as well. So there are many solutions that we can address with the harvest issue, not to mention habitat and hatcheries. So if I could leave the committee with one imperative, it's please act now. Bold action is needed. There's the framework that have been already mentioned and outlined in many of the witness testimony you've already heard.
A quick question for you, Mr. Pierce. Every time we talk about managing the seal population, interests in the United States go crazy on us. They start saying, well, we're not going to import your lobster anymore, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think we'll need to let the U.S. go first with some form of action before we're able to?
15-second answer.
From what I can see, they're fully aware of the pinniped problem in the Columbia and in Puget Sound. They've done their test studies and are moving forward. And as I said before, we're just waiting for the outcome of this 23-member panel to discuss. They're not concerned about the public. They're concerned about their fish now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hardy. We'll now go to Mr. Bragdon for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to go back to Mr. Finley one more time and wanted to circle back in regards to, is the Fraser Watershed Initiative an initiative of the Rivershed Society of British Columbia? It's a work in conjunction with that.
Mr. Chair, I believe that was a question for me.
Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Bragdon. The Fraser Watershed Initiative is a creation of the Rivershed Society of British Columbia, and we are focused on encouraging the federal, provincial, First Nation governments to make a significant investment. Currently, the project's on hold until we're able to secure further investment. We are also, the Rivershed Society is also a member of the BC Watershed Security Coalition. and we've been working closely with a provincial focus. So it's broader than the Fraser to look at encouraging the federal and provincial governments to invest in watershed security. And again, I've mentioned earlier in testimony that the COVID-19 devastation is one opportunity that the governments could look to partner on to get people working. Many of these jobs in restoration allow for social distancing, and you could invest quickly and get people back to work.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly, and I see my colleague, Mr. Fast, is on the call. I'm going to yield the rest of my time to Mr. Fast.
You're unmuted.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and Mr. Bragdon for ceding his time. Ms. Morton, I appreciated your passionate intervention. Your focus has been the fish farms. But when I look through the Cohen Commission's recommendations, there are a host of recommendations that the government has suggested have effectively been responded to. In fact, that is not the case. If you had to pick two critical actions that the federal government could take beyond eliminating fish farms in the most critical fish migration routes, what would those two actions be?
Appoint a regional director of Pacific wild salmon. There is nobody whose entire focus in DFO is what is going on with these fish. And really, you will be talking to Dr. Christy Miller. Pick up that science and use it, because that is that is the most powerful salmon restoration tool we have ever had, because it goes straight to the fish and we can work with them. We can make changes and we can ask the fish, did we make it better or not? So those would be my two recommendations.
Okay, you heard some testimony today about pinnipeds. You also heard testimony about hatcheries. Are these issues that you feel are critical and need to be addressed? Or do you feel that they are secondary to the primary interest of yours, which is the fish farms?
It's not the fish farms that are my interest. It's that I lived in a territory that the fish farms moved into, and then I studied the impact of it. But I think hatcheries are a serious problem. I think disease testing should be upped in those hatcheries. And as for the pinnipeds, removing the predators has never helped to release the prey, except maybe in very specialized situations, like is probably happening in the Columbia River and other rivers in our area. So you have to be very careful, because if you remove the animal that is eating, for example, the hake, and the hake prey heavily on juvenile salmon, you can actually have a reverse impact. So these are questionable ways to go forward.
Now to my former colleague, Finn. Good to see you again. And you and I have talked a number of times about the declining salmon populations on the West Coast. Thank you for your interest in that. On just the interest that you've articulated today, there are issues of mass marking of hatchery fish to allow for a marked selective fishery. There are proposals for selective fishing gear. Are there some additional actions beyond those that you've mentioned that the federal government should undertake to address the declining salmon populations?
Thank you, Mr. Fast. Nice to see you as well, and thank you for the question. I think I've articulated in my presentation the importance of watershed CPR, and to take bold action. The federal government must take bold action now. I think that's the bottom line. I emphasize the framework that many other witnesses have also talked about with harvest, hatchery, and habitat. I think we need a bold investment in habitat. You mentioned under harvest selective fisheries. I think that there are many nations and areas of the West Coast that are ready to go with implementing selective fishery type solutions, whether they're pound nets or what have you. I think that's something that the federal government could facilitate today. and make that happen in test fisheries, even on the lower Fraser. But the critical thing right here, and I've emphasized that before in my remarks, is that you as a committee need to come together to agree on most of the solutions. I think you could agree on most of the solutions. And the reason that I say that is that there is power in unity. And when this committee of different values and approaches and parties comes together with a unified voice, the government will have a very hard time to avoid the recommendations that this committee makes through through your recommendations in your report. So I would ask Mr. Fast if you could take that courageous step to move forward with the members of the committee to save West Coast wild salmon. That is what is needed.
Thank you, Mr. Fast. We'll now go back to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less.
Well, I wasn't quite expecting to be up again, so I'll tell you what, if Ms. May has a question or two that she'd like to, do a buzzer beater with, then we'll cede some time to her.
Okay, we'll go to Ms. May for 2 or 3 minutes because I am running out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ken. I'll try to be very. Thank you very much. I'll try to be very succinct. This is something new we have for witnesses. It's called lowering the boom. We tend to forget both to unmute ourselves. Okay, quickly. I want to go to Finn Donnelly on this quick question because I very much agree with you that if there's unity and if there's any issue that should be nonpartisan, it's saving our wild salmon. It's so much a part of our life in British Columbia. So in a hierarchy of things, you just said you think we could come to consensus. I know this may be an awkward question. Rather than ask where you don't think we have consensus, can you identify what you think the top most important bold steps are that should attract 100% support from all the MPs around this table, virtual table?
Thank you, Ms. May. I believe that we can come to consensus over a framework. For instance, I put it in simple terms that our organization has called watershed CPR, so conserve, protect, and restore. I believe that Canadians want to conserve the West Coast way of life. They want to see British Columbia's salmon survive into the future. And as many witnesses have testified, we're on the brink. We need to protect those watersheds where they live, their habitat. We need to restore in some of those areas, whether it's the lower Fraser or in the upper Fraser, or in the Skeena or the Bulkley or the Nass or any other, or on the island. We need to restore those where we've caused damage through whether it's industrial or projects or human habitat. We now know that investment in watersheds will have co-benefits, not just for salmon, but for people as well. So those areas, I believe that members of the committee feel are incredibly important, and a good use of tax dollars, because that is another very important issue. Is Canadians want us to be, members of the committee and members of the government to be fiscally prudent with their tax dollars and investments. So that is something where I think you can get where the federal government could play a role with the provincial counterparts, with Indigenous governments, with the private sector, with fishing industries, with fishermen, with community-based organizations. You could leverage that investment that the federal government makes, and it can go sevenfold with counter investments or investments from other entities. So I think
I'm going
that's
to try
where...
to sneak in one more quick thing, Finn, forgive me, but we know that our Liberal colleagues around have made a commitment to planting millions of trees. It hasn't been operationalized yet. Do you have any hints on how we could make sure that we get federal provincial cooperation to actually plant the kind of ecologically appropriate trees to stabilize slopes?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. May, for the question. For sure, there's already, we did as part of, I mentioned Rivershed was part of the BC Watershed Security Coalition. We did a sector survey. We've got 145 projects that came together to say that they could operationalize within 3 to 6 months easily over $20 million worth of projects just just in those projects alone if there was a small investment made. And that's the kind of quick action that the federal government could do with the community, with community-based organizations ready to go, Indigenous and municipalities. So that's you could get tree planting happening, restoration happening in multiple watersheds throughout British Columbia, if with small amounts of money, but targeted amounts of money. But then, of course, you'll need to look at how you do a significant investment for the country.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. May. We'll now go to Madam Gill for 2.5 minutes or less, please. You may be still on mute. Are you on mute? I'm not hearing you.
Il est éteint sur.
It was off on the headset. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair. Mr. Pierce, I will come back to my question, but the other way to get another answer. You said there was no obstacle. Really, there would be a market. There are possibilities. There are fishermen who can harvest the resource. So can you tell me more? Well, there is a consensus. We can already implement a part of the solution. What is not working right now?
We're cutting out. Could you quickly repeat that question?
Bien sûr.
There is a consensus of everybody about the harvesting of the resource of pinnipeds that could solve in some way the matter of the salmon. I was wondering if there is no obstacle on the market, on the fishermen and in infrastructures. What makes that it doesn't work? That we don't have a solution, a short-term solution.
I think I understood your question, and if I got your question correct, the solution is already in place because of the infrastructure of the professional commercial fleet and all the infrastructure supporting it, and the market is in place, but yet to be proven. And I understand, there's a 400,000 quota on the East Coast, and they've had trouble fulfilling that quota because of lack of market. And so until we get this in gear and get the trial going, we haven't got any definitive answers on that yet.
Merci.
Thank you. Maybe a last question. If there is no obstacle, what is the help that could be given to fishermen, seal fishermen or hunters?
The help is in providing employment, and this employment would not. I'm sorry, your interpretation has been in cutting out. I'm sorry, I haven't got a clear recognition of your question. My apologies from the West Coast English speaking.
Oh.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Madam Gill. We'll now go to Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes before we close up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question's back to Ms. Morton. Ms. Morton, you talked about Washington State and some of the actions they've taken in terms of how they're managing salmon farming. We saw the escape that happened in Cypress Island and how Washington State responded to that escape. We had an escape at Christmas time up at Robertson Island, north of Vancouver Island. We saw how Canada responded. Can you talk about the comparisons about how Canada is responding to escapes, sea lice, and PRV that's being put in open net fish farms?
Canada is basically ignoring the problems, whereas Washington State really grabbed it by the horns and they passed legislation to pull the industry out of the ocean, to stop Atlantic salmon farming, and most importantly, to stop the spread of this Piscine orthoreovirus, which it's a blood virus that causes Chinook red blood cells to rupture en masse. And Washington State, of course, is removing dams. So they have a huge commitment to wild salmon. They've proven this on many fronts, but Canada has no will behind their wild salmon. and now we are seeing these enormous crashes.
You talked about creating a position, a director of wild salmon, or maybe even an ombudsman, someone who's separate from government to give government, an unbiased analysis, someone like Dr. Christy Miller, potentially. Can you talk about the importance of that? Right now, we've got the BC First Nations Leadership Council. We've got organizations like Mr. Donnelly is a part of, and Pacific Salmon Foundation, all asking for the government to remove salmon farming from open net farms. Can you talk about the importance of having that position and what that could do for us?
Wild salmon stocks are fluctuating wildly. Some are crashing, some are suddenly big, and we have no idea why. People are counting salmon in a different way up and down the coast. There's no unified system. And unless there is a detailed plan, for example, what the director should do is go out to all the watersheds right now and find out what is going on. Take the scientific tools, get everybody counting and measuring the environmental parameters in the same way, provide that data to mathematical modelers, and suddenly the chaos that we're watching starts to make sense and you realize what is going on. It is absolutely key. It is one of the Cohen recommendations. You have to have someone in DFO whose whole life is understanding why these salmon populations are not only crashing, but some of them are doing well. And so we do have an opportunity to see what is working. But I can tell you, as a member of the Fish Health Committee with DFO this winter, there is nobody in DFO whose entire job is the state of Pacific wild salmon.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. That clues up our questioning for today's committee meeting. I want to say a special thank you to our guests for presenting here today and answering questions from all members, and a big thank you to the committee as well for helping make this probably one of the most informative sessions we've had in a while, I think, when it comes to Pacific salmon. Thank you to our clerk, our analysts, our interpreters, and anyone who makes it possible for us to be able to meet this way. Look forward to seeing everybody again on Thursday. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses.
Thank you.